today's assignment is a little bit different. This is chapter 3, case study. And in this example, we see that somebody has made a comment, and I'm going home to tell someone what I heard at the grocery store today. So, case study 3, and this is about uh, basically their senses after an infant is born. Hey, you would not believe what I heard at the grocery store today. Someone said newborns are just the best. You don't hear anything. They can't smell, they can't even see you. So it's really not hard to care for them. Plus, they won't even remember any of it. So even if you do mess it up, it won't affect them. After reading this week's textbook and some of the lecture notes, I think that there's a few things to unpack about that statement. While there was one small part that is somewhat true, most of what they said is not supported by what we learned. The part that is the part that is partially correct is that newborns will not remember specific events from infancy when they grow older. Most adults do not have conscious memories from the first years of life. However, the speaker assumes that if babies do not remember something, then it cannot affect them. That is not what developmental research shows. First, let's talk about the claim that newborns cannot see. So I'm going to go to our textbook if I can find it. Oh, let's get rid of that. Okay. So in our textbook, basically right here, it says the womb is a dark environment void of visual stimulation. Consequently, vision is the most poorly developed sense at birth, and time is needed to build those neural pathways between the eyes and the brain. Newborns typically cannot see further than 8 to 16 inches away from their faces, and their visual acuity is about 20 over 400, which means that an infant can see something at 20 feet that an adult would normally be able to see at 400 feet. Okay, that's interesting. Um, so, according to the textbook, vision is least developed sense at birth. Newborns can only see about 8 to 16 inches away from their faces, and their vision is fairly blurry. So, there's a tiny grain of truth in the idea that newborns do not see as well as older children or adults. However, they are definitely not blind. The textbook explains that babies can see faces and objects that are close to them, which is perfect because that is about the distance between a baby's face and the person's holding them. The next claim is that newborns cannot hear anything, and this is completely incorrect. The textbook states that hearing is actually very well developed at birth. Infants can recognize familiar voices and even show a preference for their mother's voice. Researchers found that babies whose mothers read stories to them during pregnancy recognize those stories after they're born. One study mentioned in the textbook that found that babies preferred stories they had heard in the womb, showing that learning can begin before birth. And I know it's not supposed to be a personal thing, but my husband read to my children in utero from the minute that we knew we were expecting. So I just want to throw that out there. The person also claimed that newborns cannot smell. Again, the textbook says otherwise. Newborns can recognize their mother's scent. Research found that babies only a few days old preferred their own mother's scent over another mother's scent. This shows that the smell is already an important way infants recognize and connect with caregivers. The textbook also discuss the textbook also discusses touch and pain. Newborns are highly sensitive to touch, temperature, and pain. They are not passive little beings who are unaware of what is happening around them. They experience and respond to the world through all of their senses. So the idea that newborns cannot hear, see, smell, or feel things is simply not supported by the evidence in the textbook. The next claim is that newborns are easy to care for. I think this is another assumption. And this is where I'll say the lecture notes talk about some things. So the lecture notes explain that the transition to parenthood is actually a major adjustment for families. Parents often experience sleep deprivation, increased financial stress, and less time together as a couple. This is the same thing that we talked about in the last one. And the demands of caring for a completely dependent infant. The notes also discuss postpartum depression and how both mothers and fathers experience emotional and biological changes after the birth of a child. Caring for a newborn is clearly much more complex than the speaker suggests. So I'm going to show the lecture notes. Hold on, stop. Yeah, how do I get rid of that? Sorry. see if I can get the lecture notes now. Oh, sorry about that. Um, yeah, so I had it highlighted before I struggled. Sorry, I struggle a lot with the technology. So here's where we talk very similarly to the last one, where we're talking about parents after birth and how everything changes, and you might get depressed, you might be sleep deprived. There's a lot of added demands, that sort of thing. So, okay, it's back over here. The lecture notes also explain that supportive caregiving matters. Having a supportive partner is associated with fewer birth complications and better outcomes for both parents and babies. If early experiences did not matter, then support, bonding, and caregiving would not be so important. I did not think that the lecture notes from this unit quite covered the infant senses, but it did cover the the needing the support. I think the biggest misconception in the statement is that because babies will not remember these experiences later, that they are unaffected by them. Development begins immediately. Babies are learning about trust, security, comfort, and relationships from the moment they're born. Their brains are developing rapidly, and their experiences help shape the development, even if they cannot later describe those experiences in words. So, what should have the person said instead? A more accurate statement would be newborns may not remember specific events later in life, but they are already learning from the world around them. They can hear, smell, feel, touch, and see enough to recognize caregivers, and the care they receive during infancy plays an important role in their development. To make this discussion richer, I would also point out that caring for infants is not the only responsibility of parents. The next lecture notes discuss larger issues such as healthcare access, parental leave, and family support systems. These factors can influence both infants' well-being and parental mental health. Looking at infant development means considering not only the baby, but also the environment and the support systems surrounding the family. In conclusion, while it is true that newborns will not consciously remember specific events from infancy, the rest of the statement is largely inaccurate. Newborns can hear, see, smell at close distances and respond to touch and pain. They are actively learning from their environment, and the care they receive during infancy has important effects on their development. This week's textbook and lecture notes show that newborns are much more aware and capable than many people realize. Thank you. Again, this is Jill Edwards, and this is Chapter 3, Case Study on Infant Senses. Thanks so much. Stop share.